I sold your car collection, Margaret announced, sweeping into my garage with the confidence of someone who thought they held all the cards. It's for a family emergency. The buyer will be here tomorrow. I stood there, surrounded by the vintage beauties I'd spent 15 years collecting, a 1967 Mustang Fastback, a 1963 Corvette split window, a 1970 Dodge Challenger, and my pride and joy, a 1965 Shelby Cobra. Each car represented years of restoration work, countless hours in this very garage, and memories that went far deeper than metal and chrome. My name is Alexandra Carter, and at 35, I built what many considered one of the finest private vintage car collections in the state. What my mother-in-law didn't know was that these cars weren't just expensive toys, they were my livelihood. The family needs the money, Margaret continued, mistaking my silence for shock. Thomas's business is struggling, and as his mother, I had to do something. Thomas was my husband's brother, known for his failed business ventures and inability to manage money. I ran my hand along the Mustang's hood, feeling the cool metal beneath my fingers. How much did you sell them for? I asked calmly. Margaret's smile widened. $800,000 for all four. The buyer thinks he's getting a bargain, but it's enough to save Thomas's business. I had to bite back a laugh. $800,000 for a collection worth well over $3 million. But Margaret didn't need to know that. Not yet. That's wonderful, I said, watching confusion flicker across her face. She'd expected tears, protests, maybe even a confrontation. Instead, I was agreeing with her. Well, yes it is, she said, suddenly uncertain. The buyer will be here at noon tomorrow. I'll need the keys and paperwork. I nodded, walking to my workbench where I kept the car's documents. Of course. Family first, right? Margaret's triumphant smile returned. Exactly. I knew you'd understand once you thought about it. After all, these cars just sit here most of the time. At least now they'll serve a purpose. If she only knew how many purposes they'd already served. Later that evening, as I sat in my home office, I made a phone call. Hey Jack, it's Alex. Remember that offer you made last month? Is it still open? Jack Phillips, curator of the National Automobile Museum, had been trying to acquire my collection for their upcoming vintage racing exhibit. His offer had been generous, not just financially, but also including a position as the museum's head restoration specialist. Alex, of course the offer stands. Having your collection and expertise would be invaluable to us. I smiled, thinking about Margaret's face tomorrow. Good, because I have a story you're going to love. You see, what Margaret didn't know when she sold my cars was that each one was already under contract with the museum. The paperwork had been signed last week, and the cars were technically museum property, with me retaining possession until the exhibit opened. Her illegal sale wasn't just void, it was fraud. I could have stopped her immediately, could have shown her the museum contracts and ended her scheme. But years of her interference, her constant prioritizing of Thomas over everyone else, her dismissal of my passion as a hobby, had taught me something valuable. Sometimes the best revenge is letting someone walk right into their own trap. The next morning, I waited in the garage, keys and paperwork ready. Right on schedule, Margaret arrived with Thomas and a man I assumed was their buyer. Alexandra, this is Mr. Peterson, Margaret said, practically glowing with satisfaction. He's very excited about the collection. I bet he is, I replied, watching as Mr. Peterson circled the Shelby Cobra with appreciative eyes. These are absolutely stunning, he said, reaching for the keys I held. The paperwork's all ready. I smiled, handing over not the ownership documents Margaret had expected, but copies of the museum contracts. Everything's right here. I watched as Mr. Peterson's expression changed from excitement to confusion to shock as he read. Margaret, noticing his reaction, hurried over to peek at the papers. What's wrong? She demanded. What are these? These cars, Mr. Peterson said slowly, appear to be the property of the National Automobile Museum. Any private sale would be illegal. The color drained from Margaret's face. That's impossible. Alexandra, what is this? This, I said, pulling out my phone to record their reactions, is what happens when you try to sell something that isn't yours to sell. Thomas started backing toward the door, but I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The best part of my plan was still to come, and I wanted to make sure they all understood exactly what they'd walked into. But these are just cars. Margaret sputtered, her perfectly manicured hands shaking as she gripped the museum contracts. You can't possibly have. This must be some kind of joke. I walked over to the Corvette, running my hand along its pristine chrome trim. Actually, Margaret, this joke is worth about $3 million. And that's before we factor in the federal charges for attempting to sell protected museum pieces. Mr. Peterson, who I'd noticed had been typing frantically on his phone, suddenly cleared his throat. I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I should go. Please stay, I said calmly. The museum's legal team will want to speak with you about your involvement in this attempted fraud. Thomas, who had been inching toward the door, froze. Legal team? Oh yes, I smiled, pulling up the security camera feed on my phone. They're particularly interested in last Tuesday's footage, when you and Margaret came here with a locksmith to copy my garage keys. Tampering with museum property is a serious offense. Margaret's face went from pale to scarlet. You set us up. You knew we were trying to help Thomas and you laid a trap. No, Margaret, you set yourself up. I gave you plenty of chances to ask about the cars, to show even a hint of respect for what I do. Instead, you broke into my garage, arranged an illegal sale, and tried to steal my life's work, all to bail out Thomas's fifth failed business venture. The sound of approaching vehicles made everyone turn. Through the garage windows, we could see 3 cars pulling up. Jack Phillips from the museum, my lawyer Emma Stevens, and a police cruiser. You called the police? Thomas whimpered, looking more like a scared child than a 40-year-old man. Actually, that was me, Mr. Peterson admitted. I'm not really a buyer. I'm an investigator for the Insurance Crime Bureau. We've been watching your pattern of suspicious business dealings for months, Mr. Carter. Margaret staggered backward, bumping into the Mustang. This can't be happening. We're family. Family? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Was it family when you told everyone my restoration work was just a hobby? When you convinced James to cancel our wedding because you thought I wasn't good enough for your precious son? Thank God he had the spine to stand up to you then. Jack Phillips entered the garage first, followed by Emma and 2 police officers. His eyes went straight to the cars, checking for damage. They're fine, Jack, I assured him, though they tried to sell the whole collection for $800,000. Jack's eyebrows shot up. 800. Do they have any idea what the Cobra alone is worth? Apparently not, I said, watching as the officers began taking statements from everyone involved. They also didn't know about the restoration business I run, or the museum contracts, or the fact that these cars have been featured in major automotive magazines. Emma approached with her tablet. We have everything we need, Alex. The security footage, the fraudulent sale agreement Margaret drew up, even texts between them planning the whole thing. Do you want to press charges? I looked at my mother-in-law, now sitting on my work stool with her head in her hands, and Thomas, being questioned by the officers about his business dealings. For a moment, I felt a twinge of pity. They'd been so convinced of their own righteousness, so sure that their needs trumped everyone else's. Yes, I said firmly, file everything. It's time they learned actions have consequences. Just then, my husband James burst through the door, having rushed home from work when I texted him what was happening. His eyes swept the scene before landing on his mother and brother. Really? He asked them, his voice heavy with disappointment. After everything, you still couldn't just leave her alone. Margaret lifted her tear-stained face. James, honey, we did it for Thomas. The family. Stop, James cut her off. Just stop. You did it because you've never accepted that Alex is part of this family, because you can't stand that she's successful at something you don't understand. He walked over to me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. Well, now you get to understand exactly what she does, because the museum's press release about their new collection and head restoration specialist goes out tomorrow. The look of shock on Margaret's face was priceless. Head restoration specialist? That's right, Jack Phillips chimed in. Alexandra's reputation in the classic car world is exceptional. We've been trying to get her on board for months. As the officers led Thomas and Margaret out to discuss their charges, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Years of dismissal, of snide comments and backhanded compliments were finally ending. James squeezed my shoulder. You okay? I nodded, looking at my beautiful cars, now officially part of something bigger than Margaret's small-minded schemes. You know what? I really am. 3 months after the garage incident, I stood in the National Automobile Museum's main exhibition hall, watching as visitors admired my collection. The cars gleamed under perfect lighting, each one accompanied by a plaque detailing its history and restoration journey. My personal favorite was the sign next to the Shelby Cobra, restored by Alexandra Carter, head of Restoration Services. Every time I saw it, I thought about Margaret's face when she learned what her attempt to sell my hobby had cost her. The fraud charges had hit both her and Thomas hard. Thomas faced significant legal consequences for his pattern of suspicious business dealings, while Margaret's reputation in her precious social circles was in shambles. The local papers had run the story with headlines like "Mother-in-law's classic car heist backfires." "There's my star curator," Jack called out, approaching with a group of people in expensive suits. "Alexandra, I'd like you to meet some board members from other automotive museums. They're very interested in your restoration techniques." As I chatted with them about paint matching and engine rebuilds, I caught sight of a familiar figure hovering near the entrance, my father-in-law, George. Unlike Margaret, he had no part in the attempted theft, and the whole incident had apparently opened his eyes to some uncomfortable truths about his wife and son. "Excuse me," I said to the group, making my way over to him. "Alexandra," he said quietly, looking around the exhibition. This is incredible. I had no idea." I smiled, genuinely glad to see him. "Would you like a tour?" He nodded, following me as I walked him through the collection. Unlike Margaret, who'd never shown any interest in understanding my work, George asked thoughtful questions about each car's history and restoration process. "You know," he said as we stood before the Mustang, "I used to restore old radios when I was younger. Nothing like this scale, but I understand the satisfaction of bringing something back to life." "Why did you stop?" He sighed. "Margaret thought it wasn't sophisticated enough for our social circle. Said it made us look common." The way he said it, I could hear years of suppressed passion, of dreams set aside to maintain appearances. Like mother, like son, Thomas had inherited Margaret's disdain for genuine work and craftsmanship. "It's never too late to start again," I said. "We have a small restoration workshop for kids here at the museum. They work on old mechanical toys, learn basic tools. We could use another instructor." The look of hope that crossed his face made me realize that maybe some good could come from all this. Just then, James appeared, carrying 2 coffee cups. "Thought I'd find you here," he said, handing me one. "Hi, Dad." "Your wife just offered me a teaching position," George said, still looking at the cars with wonder. James grinned. "You should take it. Better than rattling around that big house alone while Mom's doing her community service." Margaret's sentence had included significant community service hours at a local automotive vocational school, a detail I couldn't help but appreciate for its poetic justice. As we stood there, I noticed a young girl, maybe 12, pressing her face against the Corvette's window, her eyes wide with excitement. Her mother tried to pull her back, apologizing for the fingerprints on the glass. "It's okay," I called out, walking over. "Would you like to see inside?" The girl's face lit up as I opened the car door. "Really? Really? I'm Alexandra, and this is my car. Well, it's the museum's now, but I restored it." "You fixed it?" she asked, carefully sliding into the driver's seat. "By yourself?" "Mostly. Sometimes you need help with the big stuff, but yeah, I did most of it myself." Her mother watched with interest. She's always taking things apart, trying to fix them. I never know whether to encourage it or not. I thought about Margaret, about all the dreams she dismissed as inappropriate or unsuitable. "Encourage it," I said firmly. "Here's my card. We have youth workshops every Saturday." Later that evening, as James and I locked up the museum, I paused to look at my cars one last time. They looked different here, more prestigious maybe, but still mine in all the ways that mattered. "Penny, for your thoughts?" James asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "Just thinking about how things work out," I said. "Your mom tried to take all this away, but instead she gave me a bigger platform, a chance to help kids like that girl today." "And Dad," James added. I haven't seen him this excited about something in years. I turned to face him. "You know what the best part is? Margaret's community service starts next week. Wait until she finds out she'll be assisting my youth workshop program." James laughed. "You didn't." "I did. After all, she's always talking about the importance of family. Now she gets to help her father-in-law teach kids about restoration work. As we walked to our car, I couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about building something better from the wreckage of someone else's mistakes. Margaret had tried to tear down what I'd built, but instead she'd helped me create something even more meaningful. And that was worth more than all the vintage cars in the world.